I worked with Tony Robbins. I showed up to Tony Robbins' doorstep in 1995, and I had no job, no money, and no car. And I broke every single record for Tony, every income record, every sales record, all those different types of things. And I trained over 3,000 companies. I moved 25 times in 5 years. So many different types of things. So
in today's episode, I interview Brett Figueroa. Brett Figueroa has been a peak performance coach for over 20 years. He's trained thousands of sales professionals, leading many of them to the top 1% of their industry, delivered over 3,000 presentations nationwide and abroad. And with Brett's training, many of the companies earn millions more in additional revenue. So Brett has a proven track record. As you will hear in his story, he broke sales and income records at Tony Robbins companies after coming there, pretty much broke with $50 in his pocket, taking a Greyhound bus to get there. And he had some ups and downs working for Tony Robbins, and eventually went out and started his own coaching business, which has been going strong for more than 20 years now. It's a great story. He's got some great lessons about performance, results, mindset, listening. We talked a little bit about body language and influence, including influencing yourself, the most important influence. And one of the interesting things that he shared with me is he stopped using workbooks in his seminars and training over 20 years ago. We'll talk about a little bit about that and why he chose to do that. With that, I hope you enjoy the episode with Mr. Brett Figueroa. You and I have known each other for a long time now. I want to say over 20 years. It may be over 25 years, but for those of the folks out there who do not know,
it's been that long.
I just, I'm not sure if I have it handy here, but that book that I was, here it is. This workbook.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So after we talked the other day, I was flipping through the workbook.
Yes.
And there's a date on here because you had a few exercises that you wanted us to do.
Yes.
And I signed this. This is the decisions page. Your decisions paint a portrait of who you are, and you wanted us to write down some decisions and sign it and date it. June 17th, 2000.
I remember actually creating that book in San Diego. Yep. I was getting ready to come to New York to do,
Momentum Technologies of San Diego.
Yeah, San Diego. Yep, created that book in San Diego. And I want to believe that book was actually created for my very first event, which would have been in Fort Lauderdale.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct. And
yes, I was in Fort Lauderdale. I remember that event like yesterday. I remember going for a run that morning and preparing for the event for that evening. And it was my first event. And I will say that event was a very, very interesting event for me. And the reason that event was so interesting for me is because, and we'll talk about, my journey with Tony Robbins and all that kind of stuff, but I wasn't sure who I was because I had been through my life spring training. So I had this level of teaching. I'd been with Tony Robbins. So I had this level of teaching. And if you remember, we had dancers on stage. We had, all different types of things. And I remember finally doing an event and I don't actually think that we actually got to doing that workbook until many hours into the event. And so I remember being in King of Prussia, and we had Bob Safford and his family at my event.
The referral king.
Now, Bob Safford is was worth 150 million,
probably
whatever it was. Beautiful family, great. And I remember the event went until around 6 o'clock or whatever it was, a Friday. It was at that time I was just doing a one-day event, and I just remember about hours in, I took that workbook that you have right now. I threw it to the back of the room. I said, I'm never going to use the workbook again.
Really interesting.
It wasn't any point because one of the things I found out about the workbook, it seemed to be kind of a dot to dot, and life isn't a dot to dot.
So that reminds me of something you said at the very beginning of the event that was very different from most of the events that I went to. At the very beginning of the event, you said, I'm going to ask you guys to not record because I want you to be fully present. And
Yes.
I had a recorder with me. I was a meticulous note taker, and I used to record stuff, and I would actually listen to it like in the car.
Right.
After the fact to reinforce things.
Yeah.
Tell me, what was it that I know you said because I want you to be more engaged, but what was it?
It's really interesting that you actually remember that aspect, because that is still a very important aspect, because many times people want to take notes. They want to write it down. Like I got to write it down and I got to remember it. And so people would come into the event and we would have them, leave all their stuff outside the door, their bags and their recorders. And, there was no food, no drinks, like everything was to be left out. And so people go, yeah, Brett, but I need to write this down. I'm going, all right, got you. Makes sense. So I use the example that, when we get on an airplane and we sit in our chair, our seat, and we sit there and we kibitz with the, person next to us. And, we grab the magazine in front of us and we start flipping through pages and all the while that we're doing that, there's somebody that's in front of us giving us life-saving ideas, tips, instructions that if there's an emergency, here's what you need to do. Now, because we've heard it so many times, we don't listen to it. We still talk to our neighbor. We look out the window. We're reading the magazine, and they're sitting there going, to the right and to the left, and, this whole thing. So I say, it's a really interesting metaphor to life, because I say, we've heard it so many times. So, the airplane starts to taxi down, boom, lifts off into the sky. And as it does, we finally get clearance that we can, tilt our seats back, and we kind of just sit back in our seat. We look out the window, life is awesome. And, look at this and that. But then all of a sudden, bam, there's an explosion in the right-hand side of the plane. Plane tilts, boom. Captain comes on. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just lost the right engine. Here's what you need to do. So from that point forward, there's no one sitting there taking notes.
Yeah.
There's no one saying, excuse me, Captain, can you repeat that, please? Because we're listening as if our life depended on it. We're listening on the edge of our seat. And so what I call that is being a very committed listener. And so there's a committed listener and a committed speaker. And so for most, they're not speaking from their commitment, they're just speaking. They're not listening from their commitment, they're just listening. And that's why when Bob comes up and goes, yeah, my name is Bob. 2 minutes later, we, on our way out, we go, excuse me, what was your name again?
Yeah.
Because we weren't listening out of our commitment, we were just listening. But when we're committed to listening, it's a different level of listening.
That's actually one of the reasons I have a stack of blank cards whose sole purpose, I'm a super curious person by nature. And one of my biggest opportunities for improvement in my own communication is listening better and not interrupting. That's what this helps me with. Instead of interrupting, I try to remember, just write it down and come back once they're done talking instead of interrupting, which is usually a kind of
it's interesting that you just mentioned that, John. And the reason I say that is, so I'm on the phone with my foster sister the other night, and we spoke for 2 hours and 58 minutes. And so we had this amazing conversation. She found me after 50 years.
50.
50, my foster sister.
Wow.
And I got reintroduced to I was in a foster home from age 3 to 6. My foster mom, Beverly, is now 88. My foster sister, Kathy, is 59. I have a foster brother, Patrick, and a foster brother, Michael. And they all took me in when I was 3 years old. And before that, I was in this orphanage. So you go into an orphanage when the state comes in and they take you out. They don't know where they're going to place you. So they stick you basically in a room full of, kids and, beds and stuff. And so the other night I'm on the phone with Kathy, and Kathy's going on and on about something. And I felt so proud of myself. And I've just felt so proud. I said, Brett, even though I might have not agreed with, I might have not concurred with, I said, dude, just shut up, bro. Just listen. And like, how can that be applied to my life? And so I've learned how to do that. So it's interesting that you mentioned that, because that's such an important aspect. Because in my early days, I'd want to cut someone right off in their tracks. Like, oh, I got the answers. And then I've learned how to just listen and go, how can that be applicable into some area of my life? Health, fitness, finance. And I learned that through my coach, Dan Lear. Do you know Dan?
I do not.
You do not. Yeah. So Dan and I've been together for now 27, 28 years. So Dan would give me an idea. And so because of my early years and my righteousness, and I got the answer, like I learned how to just listen with Dan. Like, Brett, just stop. And how can I use that in some aspect of my fitness, finance, relationship, whatever that might be?
One of the things I found super helpful from my own awareness is watching and listening to myself back. I put out videos, whether for social media or whatever it is.
Yeah, great. Yep.
And that's where I've caught a few habits that were not making me super effective. And you mentioned two reasons that I used to interrupt even more. One was because I wanted to tell, and I didn't even realize I was doing it.
Right.
And it comes from a good place. I think I have
of course it does.
Experience and if I could help somebody avoid a mistake by sharing something with them. But then the other one was just genuine curiosity, which is, it's a double-edged sword, right? It's a great thing to have because it makes us much more able to have conversations with people and take them wherever they go.
Right.
But for me, I realized I'm so curious that tendency to interrupt was an issue. So you mentioned a bunch of things in there that I wanted to touch on, but one, and this may be totally irrelevant, but I'll ask the question and we'll find out. Yeah. What is that beautiful ring that you've got on your right hand there?
This ring is a ring that a client bought for me. And it's a sales training ring. Okay. So, and lots of people, when I go out, it says a world champion. And then it's got this whole Brett Figueroa sales trainer. And so, but it's fun when I wear it out in public because I didn't play any sports, and people look at the ring and they go, "Oh, that looks like it's a Super Bowl ring." So I usually just grab my phone out of my back pocket and pretend I'm talking to my agent.
Okay, it caught my eye.
I love blue and green. Say, hold on, I'm on the phone right now. Yeah, it's
oh, this little old thing.
Yeah, like is this Peyton Manning?
Awesome. So how? All right, there's some of the questions I'm going to ask, and I will just let you, the audience, know right off the bat. I am a huge Brett fan, so if I sound like a fanboy with some of my questions, forgive me. I am.
Thank you.
But how awesome do you have to be at something for a client to give you a ring like that? That was a rhetorical question, but just think about that. For those of you watching and listening to this, like how much of an impact you have to make.
Okay. Well, I didn't know that question was coming, but how do you need to do that? So I wrote a book. And it's endorsed by Tony Robbins. And so, how awesome. I kind of take that, and I gently thank you for that. So this guy that wrote the foreword to my book, his name is Philip. Now, Philip is in mortgage business. And when I took Philip on, he was doing 8 to 10 deals a month. And he had 21 people that worked underneath him. So 21 loan officers that worked underneath him. He coached his kids basketball 6 nights a week. He had 2 other children. He's a very, very high octane golfer. He was married to his wife, Penny, and he had a lot of demands in his life. And so when I go into a call with Philip, Philip says he's doing 8 to 10 deals a month. And I said, well, Philip, let's just go to 30. Let's do 30 deals a month. And so Philip's first reaction was, dude, how? Like, I got so many demands, bro. I'm like really kind of sort of maxed out. And I said, well, you might be stressed out, but I really, truly don't believe you're maxed out. And so the question that I asked Philip was, I said, who said you can't have it all? Like, who said you can't do more business and have an amazing marriage and yada, yada, yada. So it's this whole thing of who said you can't have it all? And that was the question that stuck with Philip. Like, dude, he's right. Who said I can't have it all? So long story short, Philip's doing 8 to 10 deals when I first call him. Our very next month, he does 30 deals. So we didn't have like some ramp up, like, oh, let's build up from 8 to 10 to 12 to 15 to 17. Like, we just went boom, right from 8 to 10 to 30. Well, he not only did it the next month, but he did it for the next 7 out of 11 months. And then he started a franchise, or it was, a mortgage franchise. Now that franchise at that time was doing $13 billion in business. So Philip's office was number 720. In 4 months, we cracked the top 10 offices. Wow. So the owner calls me up and he's like, honestly, bro, how the heck did you get Philip into the top 10 in 4 months? We've got guys still in training. And he's already in the top 10. He said, how'd you do that? And I just, I don't like to overstate things, but I said, because I'm really good. Just like, he goes, well, we're doing this big event. We're going to be in Dallas. We'll have thousands of agents. Can you come and, talk to our agents for us? So I've just been fortunate because I've been doing the work in which I do as a personal trainer, and coach and guy for 27 years now. So I worked with Tony Robbins, and I broke every single record for Tony, every income record, every sales record, all those different types of things. So, I take it lightly, but I just have fun. But I'm all about like, how do you really, really produce results? How do you get people out of their own thinking that says, oh, I'm maxed out at 8, I'm maxed out at 10. Like, no, dude, let's take it to a new level. And so that's what I've been doing now for, I trained over 3,000 companies. I moved 25 times in 5 years. So many different types of things. So I've just been blessed to work with some, cool people along the years that, buy me rings and stuff.
I thought I moved a lot being a military brat. I was somewhere in the 20s. I'm close to that. But for someone who didn't do that because of being a military brat or in the military themselves, that's a lot of moving. So
I showed up, just to kind of go back, just to give you some kind of a little bit of back, drop stories that, I showed up to Tony Robbins' doorstep in 1995, and I had no job, no money, and no car. And I was a misfit. But one of the things that I've studied and read over the years is that when you're not making money and you're not being successful, then you've got to go and hang out with people that are. Right. So my journey of, just going back was I boarded a Greyhound bus at 19 years old with 50 borrowed dollars. I was doing drugs. I was drinking like a fish. I was, so many different things. But I knew that if I stayed in that, level of environment, I would probably end up dying, which many of my friends back home are now dead because they never got out of that. So I started with Tony in 1995. in the boiler room of his company making $7.50 an hour. And one of the fun parts about it is that, and they thought I sucked. They thought it was terrible. And so, you know, I always mention to people, I say, you know, when you're poor, you've got to hang out with rich people. I say, because you can't be poor and hang out with other poor people, because then you're kind of screwed. It's like, you got money? No. You got money? No. Like, no one has money. So my friend that I'm living with at the time when I'm working with Tony, his name is Baron O'Brien. And so I'm living with Baron. Baron is dropping me off out of his limousine in downtown San Diego. And I'm in a suit, I'm in a tie, and I'm getting out of a limo to go onto a bus stop. Like, you know, like, you can't make that stuff up. That's like just wild, fun stuff, you know? So I'm doing this thing with this company called Keller Williams, and turned out to be a great meeting. At that time, which was probably 6-8 months ago, they did $1.8 billion between their two offices, 513 agents, and paid out $46 million in commission. So this video that I did, my client showed up and she sat front row, and she recorded my speech. And so that speech went up on the internet. And so Baron's watching my stuff and he goes, "You were talking about the guy in the limo, you know," and he said, "I knew when you were sharing that was me." And I was like, "I didn't actually know that you watched my stuff." And he's like, "Dude, I'm one of your biggest fans, bro." He's one of those, you know, he's one of those guys that sit sidelines, you know, and they watch your stuff, but they don't comment, they don't like, they don't love, they just, you know, they watch it from afar.
Yeah. I think I do that with most of the stuff that I watch. I don't really leave a lot of comments. If anything,
I would say that about you. I would say that too. Yep.
My move would more be to reach out to connect with the person, either LinkedIn or Facebook. Usually LinkedIn if I don't really know them.
Yeah.
And then maybe engage in a conversation there.
Sure.
You said something that reminded, you were talking about Johnny Carson earlier. When
Johnny
you said
Carson, love Johnny Carson. Yes.
When you said wild, fun stuff, I so wanted to channel Ed McMahon going, "That is some wild, fun stuff." My terrible Ed McMahon impression.
That is great.
That is.
I remember going to Ed McMahon's home in Beverly Hills. Now, they didn't let me into the home, so I just had to drive past it. So I was like, it was behind gates, and it was in Beverly Hills, and it's Ed McMahon's home. And I was like, that's Ed McMahon's home. But I did actually see Johnny Carson live in a couple different places, actually. I saw him live at dinner at a place called, oh my gosh. I forget the name of the place. But I was young. I was in awe. I didn't go up and, you know, make any noise. But I was like, "Oh, that's Johnny Carson." But I actually did see him live at his studio in Burbank, which was a lot of fun.
That's cool.
A great study for me. I study. I'm a big student of. I believe that, you know, you study certain talent. I watch a lot of body language, communication. I watch for congruency. I watch for incongruency. I love to watch interviews because I like to see where somebody may be being deceptive in their response, where they're congruent in their response. Like, there's so many things that I like to study in interviews. And that's why I like to watch guest talk shows, because they're usually doing interviews.
So I need to turn you on to, if you are not already familiar with these guys, are you familiar with a YouTube channel called The Behavior Panel?
The Behavior Panel, I'm not. Can you send me that detail? I would like to see more of that.
Yeah, I'll send you the information. It's 4 body language experts who Dr. Phil has said are the best in the world at what they do. I went to a training of theirs a month or so ago. I just had one of them on the podcast. When it comes to the body language part of it, they are par excellence. They are the go-to guys out there. So
I'm a big body language guy.
Yeah. Here's what I find interesting is in all of the communication, education, and training materials that I've looked at, they all hint at the same thing, that the words are the smallest part of our communication, right? That all the nonverbals are actually a bigger aspect of our communication. They say that, and then they focus almost exclusively on the words and the verbal. They spend very little time on the body language. So when I came across these guys, I thought, I've been doing that myself. Like my whole career, I've been aware at a cognitive level of the importance of the nonverbals, but I have not pursued a lot of study or anything else to try to get better at that aspect. So when I stumbled across these guys, I was all about it.
It's interesting you say that, and it's fun that you say that. I'm really glad you brought that topic up, because a lot of sales training companies teach you what to say. They teach you what to say. And so I've got to remind people, as a sales trainer that's, been doing this for 27 years and trained 3,000 companies and yada, 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 that people forget what you say, but they don't forget how you say it. Because I've had people come up to me and they go, wow, that was amazing what you said. That was amazing what you said. And I'm like, well, what did I say? I don't remember, but it was amazing. Like, they don't remember what you said. So 93% of our communication has nothing to, 93% of communication is the entire communication. So, people ask me all the time, and because a lot of people study the wrong stuff. And so, they don't know what to study because there's so much noise in the marketplace, right? So someone's in business, they're selling insurance, selling real estate, selling cars, whatever it is. And so a lot of the training platforms are, here's what to say, and here's the close, and here's how to this and how to that. And I'm like, dude, none of that even matters, bro. Like, so people ask me, like, what is the most important? Like, if I die after this interview, which I don't have any plans, but I don't know the bigger game, but if I were to, and people say, well, Brett, what is the most important thing for me to get my life better? And it's the one word called influence. Ooh. And so influence, whether it be how to influence ourselves or influencing others. So a lot of people, they study sales training or leadership or this or that, but influence is really the most important ingredient to really, whether it be in sales or moving people into action or moving ourselves, which is, I always say, dude, if you can't get yourself to take action, it's hard to get other people to take action.
For sure.
And so we've got to learn how to influence ourselves first, which many times, they say, what's the biggest sale of the day? That's the one when you get out of bed with yourself. It's me influencing me.
There was actually something at that training that I was talking about that I think kind of puts a point on this. One of the guys held up this package and he said, this package right here is every script I have ever written that I give out to my sales training and the other people that pay thousands of dollars to go to my training and my coaching and all this. And he goes, if I was going to give this away, who would want it? Right? A bunch of hands went up and he says, I reward action. He gives it to one of them. And he goes, now I will tell you, all those scripts are pretty much useless if you don't know how.
Right.
I think everybody in the room was so excited. Oh my God, I'm going to get this gold. These scripts. Yeah. If you know how to use them, they're gold. But it's kind of a package deal.
I'd say, people have asked me in business and sales, what's your best close? I don't have a best close. To me in sales and business, if I really feel like I've got to close, I didn't do my job right in the presentation. So, if I feel like I've got to get to the end, so I like things that are more organic and natural, meaning that at the end, I did a really efficient job and they go, oh, this sounds awesome. What's next? Where do we go from here? What do we do now?
Yeah.
So they're asking me what direction to go, and I'm not having to go, well, Bob, let's do this. Let's, the old Ben Franklin close,
Yeah.
Draw a line down the page and here's the pros and here's the cons and, all that kind of stuff. I feel that if I've got to get to a place where I've got to have these quote scripted closes, I'm out. Like it just gets too scripty, too salesy.
Yep.
It's not my style by any stretch.
So you've alluded to some of the different things that you have done in coaching, but for everyone that has not experienced your training or your coaching, give me a feel for what type of clients do you typically work with and what type of work are you typically doing with them? Because I think one of the challenges out there is there's so many people calling themselves coaches that it's caused a lot of confusion in the industry in general as to what does that mean?
Well, so I think it was last night I did a post. It might have been last night or night before, but I did a post on coaches. And the reason I did a post on coaches is because I believe that the time in which we're in right now, especially coming out of COVID, and for many still wearing masks and, all that kind of stuff. And I get it, But, people went through some very, very challenging and difficult times in their relationships, drug abuse, domestic violence. People had a hard time in their marriages, for one thing, and then all of a sudden you're quarantined in 24/7, So domestic violence was huge. It's like, they couldn't even get along when one of them were going to work or both of them were leaving for 8 to 10 hours a day. And now they're on top of each other for 24/7.
Yeah.
So, people went through some and still are. There's an enormous amount of repercussion from that particular season of life, right? So people need to they need the right information. They need the right guidance. They can't get somebody. So I kind of make fun of coaches and I do it softly and gently, but at the same time, like somebody said to me, they said, Brett, you seem like you kind of have it out for coaches. And I said, so many people are, that you can go to the Holiday Inn, pay $1.49, sit in a seat at the Holiday Inn for 2 days, get a certificate called, life coach. And now they're giving you life advice after 2 days and $1.49.
Yeah.
So, I'm like, so I have a friend of mine, he flies big planes. He's 787s. And so nobody's going to get into his plane and go to some foreign destination with a 2-day badge that says pilot.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen, I mean, if it did, they're just like, they're all about death anyway. Let me risk this one. So for me, I'm all about like anything. I'm not, you've got to have credentials. So I'm all about credentials. I'm like, I'm not going to listen to dude if you ain't got credentials. So for me, I'm all about, so people they know the name Tony Robbins. They go, oh, Brett's, 1995. It's now 2022, 3,000 trainings, moved 25 times in 5 years, written 3 books, yada, yada. Like, there's a certain level of credentials that I can come to the table with. And so people feel safe with that. They don't have to question those credentials because they're solid credentials. So for me, I'm all about people getting the right information because you got the right person, but the right person getting the wrong person's information, well, that's a mismatch.
Yeah.
So, what is it for me that's really the most important part? So there was a time, which I've gotten gentler and nicer over my years, but sometimes, but there was a time where, I was just taking call after call after call for people wanting to do coaching with me, all these referrals and blah, 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 blah. And so I would say to people, my whole thing was, dude, I appreciate you calling, but I'm not your coach. They go, what? And I go, yeah, dude, I appreciate you calling, but I'm not your coach. Yeah, but I got money. I go, yeah, but you're an ass. So So I don't care. And then they would hang up and be vicious and then go online and go, I just got off the phone with this guy, Brett Figueroa, and he's such an ass, and he's this, and he's, just tear me apart. So I just recognized it was really, really, and has been. So when I was younger, I didn't know what vetting was. Like I never heard the word vetting. And so when I had somebody, I had to ask them, like, what is vetting? What the hell does that mean? Like what it was, I don't know what that means. And so what I've learned to do is I've learned to vet really, really powerfully and strong. So what people say to me is they go, oh, Brett, you're a really great coach. I said, I appreciate that. I said, but actually, I think I'm a better horse better. I said, because I can know how to coach all day long, but if I go betting on wrong horses, I'm going to be screwed. So I bet on the right horse. And so what I listen for is when I'm in conversation with that person, is I listen for several elements of, because people will go, oh, I need a coach. And I'm like, wow, that sounds quite needy. So I'm not into working with needy people, so somebody that's committed, that's a different story. So what I've learned to do through my years is I've just learned how to vet really, really, really good to make sure I'm betting on the right horse. And then, because for me, I'm all about, like how do I get winning horses? I don't want a bunch of losing horses. And so, I kind of use the other examples is I'm like just a talent agent. And as a talent agent, let's say, in Hollywood, CAA and, or, some of the other, I forgot the name of them, but big ones, massive ones. So the talent scout sits behind their desk, some big agent, right? Some big agent. And they're sitting behind their big desk and, they press a button on the phone and, the button reaches out to the assistant in the front office and it says, okay, send in the next one. And so the agent's sitting there and the door opens. Well, that agent is very, very talented. So they know right away, dud or stud.
Yep.
They know right away. They don't have to go, well, let's go get coffee and, let's sit down and no, they know right away. As soon as they walk in, dud or stud. So they're watching, listening, paying attention for certain factors, mannerisms, certain what have you, but they usually know as soon as that person walks in the door.
So you hit on a couple of things that to me, they are part of your philosophy about how you operate your business and how you deal with people, right? You mentioned credentials.
Yes, credentials. Got to have credentials if you want me to listen. Otherwise, I'm out.
And I'm of the same philosophy as you, but you mentioned something sort of without saying it explicitly, which I think is a big factor, especially in the coaching industry.
Yeah.
Which is the experience. Credentials alone. So you probably can't even read it because of the glare, but I did Tony Robbins coaching program. That's my certificate from his coaching program.
Nice.
100-hour program, great program.
Yep.
But I don't advertise myself as a coach.
Yeah.
Because for me, and this is totally, there's lots of people that came out of that program, they started coaching right away.
Yeah.
For me personally, as an individual, I feel like I need more experience before I go out there and say, hey, this is the type of coaching I do and how I do it and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And when you talked about vetting, it made me think about, there are probably questions that, I don't know if you have a checklist or if you just do it intuitively because you've been doing
it's intuitively. I don't have any certificates, first of all. I have no certificates. Okay. I think certificates are, they're great. They're fine. They serve its purpose. And, you walk into a doctor's office and they got all kinds of great certificates, right? So, certificates in certain situations in life are very, very important. I probably wouldn't want to see a doctor that didn't have these certificates personally. Go ahead.
So I'm curious, when you were working for Robbins, what was
it's intuitive by the way. It's just I'm at a certain place in the work in which I've done it through experience. It's more just I go with gut, intuition, and instinct.
Right.
And usually when I go against my gut intuition and instinct, when I go against it in my younger years, and, you want to help someone out. It's like, it's like the gym guy that goes, they're 400-pound person. And, it's like, hey, how do we get this person down to a buck and a half in a week? It's like, so it's like, sometimes you just take a bet on certain things.
Yeah.
But yeah, anymore now it's very intuitive. But,
Brett,
what I was going to say with that is that every single time, and I'm not being facetious, every single time I go against my grain, instinct, intuition, gut, I get beat on the back end.
So what?
Because they don't do well. They don't do well. And then I can always look back and go, I knew it on call one. It's never call 2 or 3 or 4. It's always call 1. Always. 100% of the time. And I go against the grain of that, but I always knew on call 1, they're going to be a risky one, but I'm going to take a bet on them. It's like the horse with the limp. It's like, it's a nice horse, and look at the beautiful horse. And, let's bet on this one that it's going to win.
So what was your gut telling you? You were working for Tony Robbins, who was at that time already like the top guy in his field. You were breaking records. You were crushing it with your own income, with what you were doing in his company. What was it in your gut that said, I'm going to go out there and strike out on my own?
Well, because I had already gone through, after you've moved 25 times and you've done 3,000 trainings and, you break every record for this guy, Tony Robbins, and you've just done certain things where and at that time my son was 2. So, it was like, okay, it's time to get off the road. And we were in Fiji and at Tony's place, and we take him into one of his bures and we say, we're done. And it's been a great, great ride, and it's been fun. But, it's kind of like, you just kind of hit a certain place in your life where you go, okay, it's time to go do your own thing. But for those watchers or listeners, we kind of get to, and we talk about the end result, right? All these different sales things, which I'm not overly comfortable with talking about. But again, you got to give credentials to those. But I was also the guy that started at $7.50 an hour, the guy being dropped off out of a limousine, to go to work in the boiler room of the company. And I got to share this quick story because it's a really interesting story. That when I went to work with Tony, and we talked about these, being dropped off out of a limo, $7.50 an hour, being a telemarketer, they finally put me out on the road, which is what I really which is what I wanted to do, was to go out on the road and be a trainer. I'm not a corporate guy. I'm not an inside guy. Like, the inside people would listen to me and go, gosh, dang it, he's loud.
Your energy doesn't strike me as the inside, like in a cubicle.
It was way too cumbersome. And, they're like, well, let's put him out on the, so they put me out on the street. So Tony's got a group called FSRs. An FSR is basically his Navy SEAL 6 team. Like, they're the best of the best, the elite of the elite. They spend 48 weeks out of the year on the road, and they're doing, 2 to 3 trainings a day. Usually one in the morning, one in the afternoon, one in the evening, and that's what they do. And they go into companies and they train, and then they sell tickets for Tony's upcoming event as he's coming into town, maybe 4, 5, 6, 8 weeks later. So they put me out and they brought me into the office, my sales manager. And she goes, and it's on a Friday. She goes, well, Brett, we've decided we're going to send you out on the road with the guys. Now they only was doing that with me because they wanted to get me out of the corporate office. I was just too loud. So let's just get him the hell out of here. If he does well on the street, great. If not, boom, he's out. So they send me so I say to my sales manager, I said, well, I had a meeting in San Francisco. The meeting was called What a Racket. There was this racquetball club. It's called What a Racket. And so I go, and I say to my sales manager, well, what do I say? I don't know how. I'm not, you want me to do this thing? I don't know what to do and say. So she goes, well, just come from love. Well, that didn't work at all. So for those watchers or listeners, like, coming from love is great, in your marriage or these other things, but there's certain things you've got to actually have some skills, And so, yeah. And so I go out there, and I'm out there, and I drive from San Diego to San Francisco, which is one hell of a drive.
That's a long drive. Yeah.
That was a long drive. And so I meet up with the rest of the guys that are all living together, Tony's FSR, Navy SEAL guys. And I use that lightly, obviously, but it's just, from a reference point.
Good analogy.
Yeah. And so 2 weeks later, they let me go. They bring me to the side. Tony's doing a big event. They bring me to the side in one of the other adjacent rooms. And they said, Brett, we really like you. You're a good guy, but you're fired. Dude, I've only been out here 2 weeks. They said, yeah, but we've got someone else. They're better. And so they said, well, we're leaving San Francisco to go to Los Angeles. And they said, you're welcome to go. Obviously, we can't tell you whether you can go to Los Angeles or not, but we're not going to give you a car. We're not going to give you housing. We're not going to give you appointments. We're not going to this and like the whole thing of boom, because, they're firing me, letting me go.
Just real quick for clarity. This is before you broke all the records, right? This was
So this is all leading somewhere, I promise. And so I said, well, okay, I'm going to go. I don't have a car. I don't know where the hell I'm going to live. I don't have any money, but I'm really committed to doing this craft. And so I get to Los Angeles, and I didn't have anywhere to live. So I called my friend, and he goes, I have a boat in this place called Marina Del Rey. Now, you probably know Marina Del Rey. And, I remind people that there's these things called yachts, and those are big things. And then there's things called boats. It's they're totally different. So I was not on a yacht. I'm on this little boat. I'm this big guy. I'm sleeping at the front of this boat in this little tiny space. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to make it out here. I'm going to succeed. And all the other guys are living in beautiful apartments. They got these beautiful cars. They're making money. They got appointments set for them. And I'm this misfit living on a boat with nothing more than drive and commitment. I'd wake up in the morning. I had nowhere to shower, so I would use the community shower. I would get showered, got on my suit and tie. The guys in the shower area, they're getting ready to head out on their boats and their yacht for the day. And I'm this guy putting on my suit, my tie. Back in the day when I had hair, I had a blow dryer, and I'm blowing my hair back and doing all this stuff. And then I go, well, how the hell am I going to make appointments? Right? Because our job was to go in and run these appointments and then sell tickets for the Robbins event coming into town. So I'm like, how long am I? So I had a pocket full of dimes. I didn't have a cell phone. I had a pocket full of dimes. And back in the day when we had phone booths, right, with the big chain hanging down and big yellow pages, and and I would use the yellow pages and call these appointments. So I'd set these appointments. Hi, my name is Brett Figueroa. I'm here in town. One of Tony Robbins' trainers. We're doing these free customized, trainings, yada yada. And I'd set these appointments. So I'm like, well, how am I going to get to the appointments? So I was back on the bus. Right, get in the bus, you put in a quarter, it takes you pretty much anywhere in the world you pretty much want to go. And so I started doing well. I started to succeed. And then so we had dinner at this place called the Magic Castle in Hollywood with Tony. And so he said, hey, Brett, you did really well. Let's get you coming back. Come back on board. So he brings me back on board. And so now I'm with the guys, right? Traveling, got a car now, got a place to live. Life is good. Mm-hmm. And so there's a guy by the name of Jim Rohn, and he says the day that turns it all around. So it's December 15th, 1996. And that was the day that turned it around for me. My guys were being diverted to go to Tony's house for a Christmas party. I, on the other hand, am being diverted back to the executive office in San Diego. And I didn't know why. And so when I got into, and you'll find this fun, is I go get into the office. Like, I didn't know why. I was back in the sales manager's office. And so, but when I walked in there were pink papers on the desk.
Mm.
And so she said, okay, Brett. And I sat down. She goes, we need to let you go today. Today's your last day. And so I sat there for just a half a moment. And I thought one or two things, either step up or step aside. And stepping aside wasn't an option for me. And so I stood up and I said to my sales manager, Deb, I said, you can't fire me. I said, matter of fact, I'm not going. You'll need to call security. So I said, well, I'm not going anywhere. I said, you can't fire me. I'm not going anywhere.
That's bold, my friend.
Yeah. And so it was out of that ultimately turned everything around. Broke every record from that point forward. So it was to me, it was stepping up and rising rank. And so it just worked. So there's people that are out there where they might settle and just end and quit or whatever. And I'm like, no, I'm not signing the papers. I'm not leaving. And I don't think she'd ever had to deal with that before, my sales manager, because she wasn't looking for a debate, just a signature. Let's get him out the back door quietly, be on his way. So it was that day that really turned it around for me, where I began to really, really look inside myself and said, Brett, who must you become as a man in order to, become all you can be? So we ultimately broke all records, all income records. I took my income after that meeting. I started taking my income up to $3,000 a check, $5,000 a check, $7,000. I got to a place of $10,000 a check. And I finally said,
Now,
no.
This is back in 1995, you said?
That is, this would have been 90, probably 7, because I started with Tony at 750 in 95.
Okay, so all you
probably
accountants out there,
97, 98, somewhere in that place.
all you accountants out there, do the math real quick. That's good money today. That was a lot more.
Well, it's funny
back
because,
then.
it's a lot. And so I took my income from making $10,000 on one check to making over $100,000 on the very next check.
Holy cow.
And so people that go and they do any YouTube search and Brett Figueroa, Tony Robbins, they'll see a video on YouTube or on my website. There's a video of Tony bringing me on stage, and he's bringing me on stage because he wants me to train his company. And this was after I had already left, but he loved my story so much that he wanted me to share my story. And so as you just mentioned, he said, Brett went from making 10,000 to 100,000. And he said, in today's money, and again, this was back even 10, 12, 15 years ago. He goes, that in today's world would be about $250,000. So in today's world, like the commission structures and all that kind of stuff.
Right. So some of the things that I've noticed as you were describing some things is your approach is probably a big part of what's made you so successful. Your approach is very different from what a lot of the sort of cookie cutter coaches that they go and get a certification and they've got checklists and all this.
Yeah.
One of the things that I have heard you say before that I think to the untrained eye or ear, someone might listen to and go, what? That doesn't sound right. And it's just that simple statement that it doesn't matter what people want, right? We hear a lot of people out there, especially parents, and my parents would say, hey, you can do anything, get anything you want in this world. You just have to work hard. What do you mean when you say it doesn't matter what people want?
So, all right, so what I mean by that is that lots of times somebody will come up and, they'll have a list and they'll go, all right, coach, here's what I want. I want to lose weight. I want to quit smoking. I want to be a better person, a better dad. I want to this, and this. So they have a whole laundry list of wants. So then I just take it and I turn it in and I throw it and I go, I don't care. I was like, who cares? They're like, well, what do you mean, who cares? You know, because we've been so trained and programmed, you know, you can have anything in life you want.
Yeah.
You know, just know what you want and go after it. Like, that is the biggest crock of horse doo-doo I've ever heard. It's horrifying. It's terrifying. I'm not Santa Claus. You know, I let people know, if you want to let somebody know what you want, go sit on Santa's lap. You know, because at Christmas time, he's going to ask you, so what do you want, little child? So, but as a coach, I really, truly, honestly don't care. And many times, just to create even a visual effect, I'll take their list, I'll pull out a lighter, and I'll light it, and the whole thing disintegrates on the floor, right, in ashes. Because the universe doesn't hand out a bunch of wants. It's not, you know, the universe doesn't, it just says it's not set up that way. You know, so people go, well, I want to lose weight. Yeah, but most people are fat. Yeah, I want a better marriage. Yeah, but most are divorced. Yeah, I want to be rich, but most are broke. So if it was true that we get in life what we want, then people would have what they want. Right? So if I went to somebody and go, all right, I've got two hands. This one is a broke hand. This one's a rich hand. Go ahead, choose which one. They're always going to choose the rich one, right? Most people aren't going to go, well, I'm going to take the broke hand because, like, poverty is great. So
I'm a glutton for punishment.
They're going to opt in for the rich hand. And so, but then they don't understand because they're like, damn, why isn't things working? I want to be rich and I want to have this and I want that, blah, 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 blah. But again, the universe doesn't hand out a bunch of wants. So they say, well, what do you mean by that? I say, well, what I mean is the universe doesn't hand out a bunch of wants. I say, here's what it does reward. So people ask me, I say, dude, I don't care what you want. The only thing I care is, what are you committed to? What are you committed to? So I got this from having a client and going to the gym, and he's here in Colorado, and he says, you know, I want to lose 10 pounds. I said, sounds great. Let's go to the gym. Boom. So we go to the gym. We get there, whatever time, 6, 7 o'clock. And we have this great workout. I say, you know the drill. Tomorrow morning, boom, 6 o'clock, bam. Now, at the end, it was, we'll see you tomorrow, right? Day 3. Now, on day 3, couldn't find hide nor hair of this person. And so I call him up and he goes, after I couldn't find him for the first many hours, I said, well, I thought you said you wanted to lose 10 pounds. And he goes, I do want to lose 10 pounds. I want to lose 10 pounds super bad, bro. He says, but here's the deal. I'm just not committed to it. The early mornings, the traffic, the this, the that. So I thought, oh, got you. Where I thought wanting and committing were the same thing.
Yeah.
I thought it was the same thing. And I got that it's not.
Yeah.
So what happens is, what I do is I align with people based upon what their commitment is. So, Bob's or person's gotta retract from I want. I say, I know you want to do this, Bob. My question to you is, are you committed to it?
Yeah, this really hits home with me. Thinking back many years ago when I thought I wanted to get a PhD. And then I started doing a bunch of research and I talked to a few PhDs and realized, wow, this is a crap ton of work. It's a huge investment of time, money, effort. And the more I researched it, I realized I want to be a PhD, but I'm not committed to doing what's required to get there.
Right.
And I realized, hey, that's okay.
Yeah.
At least I know.
Yeah.
I'm not committed to that. And let me not waste a lot of energy
right.
pining over it. That it's okay to realize maybe that that's just not your path. I want to ask you about, I know you're a dad. I know I've seen some of your posts on Facebook bragging about some of the incredible stuff that your kids are doing. And I'm curious, what kind of tips could you give people who are parents? Some of the things that you may have done with your kids that maybe some other parents have not done, because as we've already heard, some of your philosophies and the way you work is unconventional compared to some other folks.
Yes, definitely.
And I've seen your posts. I'll let you talk about what you want to talk about, but some of the stuff that your kids are doing is like off the chart success.
Yeah.
So share, if you will, some of the things that you've done with them that you think have sort of enabled them to have that type of success.
Thanks for the question on that. And so, I alluded to, I boarded a Greyhound bus with 50 borrowed dollars when I was 19 years old. Drugs, alcohol, no college, none of that. But it was very important for me as raising children. It was very important that they didn't have that same life. And so, people many times will say, "Oh, Brad, you're such a great dad, such a great dad." And I said, "No, I appreciate that." But I said, I actually think I was a better praiser than a parent, meaning that I didn't, a lot of times parents want to go around and school their kids all day. Well, if I was you, son, this is what I would do. Always have this great advice for the kid. That wasn't me. I praised him on everything. So, so a couple things. Well, one is my kids thought I was deaf. And the reason I thought I was deaf is because I would do my coaching calls so loud in the house. And I would have my TV that I'm watching a Tony Robbins training or, somebody, and I have it turned up super loud. Like, okay, Dad's clearly deaf. I just didn't want to go training my kids. I'll let someone else do it, So I didn't want to, say, son, you need to read this book and you need to listen to this and watch that. I just talked super loud to my coaching clients, would walk them, pace around my house, and so I wasn't usually behind closed doors. So I think that really for me it was really just praising my kids that they're just, and showing them that you could do really, really great things, but without being the know-it-all, because I was just a kid that boarded a Greyhound bus with, they knew Dad didn't go to college. They knew that, that wasn't my place. But, you mentioned my oldest son is going to be 25 in September. He's graduated high school with a 4.5 GPA. Got a $250,000 scholarship. Went to Budapest for math. He's now working as a professor and working on his master's for math in Montana. And Eagle Scout. So for those that know any, scouting, he's Eagle Scout, top ranking. And then my son Grant is, I love him so much. And he's 21, a big kid, big 6'10" kid. And he played basketball for years. But him and I went and had breakfast, and he said, Dad, he goes, Mom, I think Mom's been living vicariously through me. And because Mom's dad was a basketball coach, and Mom's dad passed away in 1997. So having a 6'10" kid, boom, let's get him in basketball. But it wasn't his passion. So he takes up golf. And so he's been playing golf now for 2 years as of July. So he pulls me to the side at the driving range. And he said, Dad, I've got one of your genes. I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, I've got the gene of dreaming big.
Oh, that's a good gene.
I heard that and I was like, well, damn, nice. It was like, he said, my goal is to be on the PGA Tour by the time I'm 25. And he just started golf 2 years ago in July, and his dream is to be on the PGA Tour by the time he's 25.
That's awesome.
Which, I'm like, I never take that away from him. I'm like, I'm the guy that's like, dude, you know, Tiger Woods, I know he thinks he's good, but you're so much better. You know, like, just stay on the course, bro. You're doing amazing. And then I've my daughter Gannon, she's just amazing, and she's 17. But all the kids did so well, and you know, Grant graduated high school with a 4.3 full ride, all this, and you know, we give him lots of accolades. But you know, I think from parenting, it's just sometimes it's just not about parenting so much. Like, you know, you and I, we probably had, you know, parents, right? And they, you know, wanted to give you fatherly advice and motherly advice. And, you know, if I was you, I would do this. And I was just never my angle.
Oh, interesting.
It just wasn't my angle. I just have let my kids. So I'll share with you this last story on this. But so I like to go to church. It's one of the things I do. And so somebody had asked me, they said, well, do you bring your kids to church? And so because some people get very righteous, right? So they go, gotta go to church, bring the kids, and, you know, everybody's locked into church on Sundays. Now, I get it. That's, you know, very Christian of them and what have you. But it was never my style. You know, it was never, let me drag the kids to church and get dressed and rush the house and all that stuff. It was never my style. And so one night I'm at church and we do a thing, well, we used to before COVID, but it's called Revival Night. And so Revival Night started at 7 p.m. and would go until about 1 a.m. And this particular night, and I go to this big mega church here in Colorado, and I love it. I love the friends and the people, camaraderie and fellowship, what have you. So my kid, so I'm going around because we were supposed to pray, and you go around the sanctuary, and you know, you're praying for this and family, but that particular night I'm praying and praying and praying for my kids, like just really praying that God guides them and directs them and leads them and gives them a good heart, and I'm just crying and crying and like profusely crying. So I get home that night about 1 o'clock, and I get a text. Now I'm like, okay, it's 1 o'clock, 1:30 in the morning. I'm getting a text from my son, Grant. And Grant says, Dad, he said, do you want to go with me tomorrow to get a tattoo? That was very odd to me, but I didn't question it. Nobody in my family's had tattoos. And so Grant says, well, yeah, go with me. And I said, yeah, that sounds fun. I didn't ask him what kind of tattoo. I didn't want to do any of that. So we go to the tattoo place the next morning, and the guy goes, so what kind of tattoo would you like? And he lifts up his arms and he goes, I like a tattoo. And I believe that it's God's highs are higher than God's lows. And so they're peaks. There's one peak, and then it comes down, and then there's another peak, and boom. So that's in his arm. I was like, well, that's super cool. I never took him to church, and he's got the cross hanging. So sometimes I think that, you know, just giving their kids space to do what they need to do without, again, quote, parenting every 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Because I believe that many times, you know, the kid goes in the other direction.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't have any kids of my own, but my girlfriend is constantly complimenting me on like how well I get along with her. From time to time,
I do rent mine out. So,
but my girlfriend will comment on like how well me and her kids get along.
Yeah.
And when I thought about it, one time I realized part of it is that I'm not trying to parent them. I'm not trying to just be their friend. But I always remember when I was a kid, one of the things that I hated the most was when it felt like adults were talking down to me.
Yeah, yeah.
So I always try to keep in mind, like, they're just a younger person. I'm just an older person. That's all. They're very smart. They're very personable. They're great with people. They can talk to adults just like they can talk to their own friends.
Yep.
And they're older now. I mean, her son's in the Marines and her daughter's a senior in high school. You know, they're not little kids.
Right.
I've always kind of been that way with other people's kids. And as you were describing it, I thought, oh, I guess maybe intuitively, I just, you know, did that. It sounds like probably for you, that was as well. I want to ask you a couple of quick fun questions and then wrap up.
Yeah.
One of them, so I'm a foodie. Back when I first moved to North Carolina, I actually was thinking about starting a foodie website. It ended up being a want, not a commitment. So that never happened. But if I were to come and visit you and we went out to dinner and you wanted to take me to dinner to some place that was representative of where you live and the type of food that you like, where would you take me? Where would we go?
Probably In-N-Out Burger.
Ooh, cool. I've actually never been to In-N-Out Burger.
It's amazing. I love In-N-Out Burger, but it's I'm not. I think that for some people, they like the environment or the ambiance, and I'm just not into like, my cousin and we had a couple people come into the house and we went to dinner, and we went to a simple place, the Cheesecake Factory. It was fun, but they had just come from a different dinner where they had spent $800 for that dinner.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I'm not that brand of foodie.
That just doesn't work for me. Like, I'm not that,
yeah,
posh where I gotta go, yeah, I need to eat. First of all, I leave usually out of there hungry.
Yeah, I've noticed that with the super fancy places tend to give really small portions.
Yeah, they're tiny portions, and then they put some, whatever the heck they put on the plate.
A lot of focus on the presentation.
Yeah, I just bring my own Hershey syrup and I, put it around the plate. And
you know what I find so ironic about that is if you watch any of the shows on Food Network, any of the cooking shows, chefs take giant bites. And yet they end up, when they go to these high-end places, creating these little tiny type of meals. Okay,
yeah, that's not my style. I'm too quaint. I just like to, I enjoy the conversation with the people. It doesn't need to be, an $800 meal. Like,
right.
Okay. I'm not saying that, that I'm opposed to that. It's just not my normal thing.
Just not your thing.
I'm just a basic, chicken Alfredo, hamburgers, pastas. If I want to be healthy, I get Caesar salad or something. But, I'm not too foo-foo-y when it comes to food.
Gotcha. Bro, what's your favorite movie?
My favorite movie would be Passion of the Christ.
Okay. Cool.
That would be my favorite movie.
Last question. Well, actually, two last questions. First one, other than your own, what is your favorite book that you would recommend to people?
My favorite book.
Or it could be one you would recommend. Either one. You can go however you want with the question.
I think that, going back to, sometimes it's all about just staying basic, right? There's so many things that many times get over encumbered. The information is like, you have to like Google words and like, what did they say? So I think that, going back to the basics would be, Think and Grow Rich. If I was to go.
I had a hunch you were going to say that.
I knew you did.
Well, one of my well-worn.
Can I see the cover?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, got you. Yep. I mean, it's just, it's so, it's sold a gazillion copies.
Yeah.
And it's hard to debate the information because it's just solid information. And I think that many times people, I think many times it's about, being brilliant at the basics.
Yeah.
And so I think for many times people, attempt to, they just pay attention to things that at the end of the day, it just doesn't matter. But that book right there is so solid that it's a hard thing, like I say, I think if somebody were to get that level of information and really take that in and use it and apply it, then they can do pretty well with their life. My friend Marty Rodriguez is the #1 real estate agent in the world with Century 21. She's 71 years old. Marty and I have been buddies and pals friends for 30 plus years. She makes sure that she reads that book every single year without fail. Always reads that book.
I have met a handful of very successful people who have said that they do that they reread Think and Grow Rich every year.
Well, I think it goes back to, the whole, repetition is the mother of skill.
Yeah.
It's just being repetitive, doing it again. And I think for some people, they do it, they go to the gym once or twice and they go, well, it's not working.
Yeah. I heard somebody say recently, many times we need to be reminded more than we need to learn something new.
Okay. So that I've got to share with this and then we can go and whatever, unless you have more questions. So I was sharing with you this book. Let's see, where is it? Okay. So, in this book, my mortgage book, it says on page 9, it said, I'm the reminder guy. I'm just going to close with you, read you this real quick. It says, I'm the reminder guy. As most people just require the reminding. A couple of years ago, I was coming in from the backyard when I overheard a household conversation that seemed so fitting and perfect. My 2 boys, Garrett and Grant, were sitting at the breakfast table when Garrett said to Grant, hey, Grant, remember, we're a sharing house. I thought, hey, Grant already knows we're a sharing house. As in our house, we say we're a sharing house and a loving house. Yet it was convenient for Grant to forget the whole sharing thing. Forgetting is more convenient than remembering. Forgetting because it's more convenient than remembering seems to be the story for so many. I thought Grant just needed to be reminded, as being reminded in that moment was key to sharing. I got in that moment that the majority of the time, reminding people is what I do best. Very rarely is that, oh my gosh, I've never heard that before. Wow, geez. Most of the things in this book you will have been exposed to at some point in your career. And some will be new for you. Regardless, it's time to be reminded and do. So it's interesting that I wrote a whole thing on what you just mentioned.
Well, that's great. Brett, I don't know if I could top that, so I'm not even going to try. I think that is a great way to wrap up. And where can people find you? What's the easiest way for them to find you?
They can go to my website, Brett Figueroa International, brettfigueroanational.com, and they can see some of my work. They can see the video of Tony Robbins. There's a picture on my website that's fun for people that study this work and they know the guy by the name of Jim Rohn. Yeah, and so the picture I have on my website is actually the only picture on the internet with me, Tony Robbins, and Jim Rohn. And so Tony used to work for Jim Rohn when Tony was 17. So Tony was like that Navy SEAL guy who used to travel the country and work for Jim and yada, yada. Yep. And so, but it's the only picture of me, Tony, and Jim Rohn. And it's the only picture that Tony Robbins has with Jim Rohn.
Really?
It's the only picture that Tony has with Jim Rohn. Now, how do I know that? And how do I know that? Because on the year of Jim's birthday or his death day, the picture Tony always sends out is the picture of me, Tony, and Jim Rohn. And I'm the misfit that's in the middle with my arms around him.
Yeah, I've seen it. So it's a great picture, dude.
So they can't cut me out. So Tony was doing an event here. I don't know, he had 40, 50,000 people virtual here. And so I was getting all these text messages because during a part of there, Tony was talking about, who Jim Rohn is and, who his teacher was and yada, yada, giving some, relationship context around his messaging. So then Tony puts it and displays it on, the virtual screen. So I get all these pet messages like, Brett, Tony Robbins just shared your picture with him and Jim Rohn. I said, yeah, because it's the only one he has. So,
Well, that
it's the only one he has. And I'm the guy that's in the middle with my big ass arms around their big,
So for those of you who this is the first time you've been exposed to Brett, that this is your first time experiencing Brett Figueroa, that picture he's talking about, you, Jim Rohn, and Tony Robbins, for you self-improvement freaks out there, that is like the Mount Rushmore.
Oh yeah, it's iconic.
Self-improvement, right?
Yeah.
So get to his website, consume more of his stuff. Brett, I cannot thank you enough for being so generous with your time. I could pick
People
your
can
brain,
reach
talk to
me
you for
anytime
hours.
too. You can text me. I'm more than happy to give out my number, 720-672-5783.
Who does
Feel
that?
free, text me, call me. I'm always. If I can't answer, I'll respond.
Awesome. Dude, thank you very much for your time. I would love to do this again one day down the road. Like I said, I could talk to you and pick your brain for hours, but I want to respect your time. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up, and we will see you guys next time.